Good morning, everybody. Sorry we are a few minutes late for technical reasons. And we started this morning with the people-centered leadership So we have here, as usual, one speaker, two panelists. And of course, the topic is really vast, and I'll try to synthesize why today we need even more effective leaders. Since we live in a period of globalization and of growing complexity and growing problems, and so to meet our present and future challenges, every community needs to find effective ways to cope at the world level and also to the local level. So we need to understand how we can foster, how we can create a condition that facilitate the growth, the emerging of effective leaders in our communities at every level of society, from the micro level to the worldwide level. And not only we need effective leaders at every level, we need leaders that are with a healthy personality, not narcissistic and psychopath as we were discussing before, and actually, sadly, history dramatically reminds us. We need leaders that are people-centered, that are in touch with their people, that are empathic. We need leaders that are generous, that feel, as Barton reminds us, pleasure in giving and serving the common good, that experience, not talk, about agape, selfish love. We need leaders that are empowering their people and take pleasure in doing empowering action, and not people that want to enslave them. And we need that so badly, because in this age of catastrophe, untold in their magnitude, we know I have a massive research data, not only naturalistic observation, that independent, resilient, and empowered people are much more creative and are much more capable of effective crisis management than those that are just passive followers. Our friend Koenig Pasili, the 12th of March, addressed 6,500 delegates of the UN agency in Japan, presenting a position paper just on that, the importance, strategic importance of people-centered leaders. And what are people-centered leader characteristics? Of course, I'm not going to do an elencation that every effective leader is in need to possess the knowledge, to apply knowledge, and to be, there is a vast literature and a lot of research. I'm talking about the intrinsic capacity that make a leader, be a really effective one. A little bit like in any field, what kind of characteristics are horses that running among good horses have an extra sprint. In many cases, the researcher confirmed this, is listening. Interesting. Usually we see a leader talking to these people, but a leader that listens. And so, how do you listen? Listening is a key leadership skill. I had the privilege of studying and working for many years with the late Carl Rogers, that did a lot of research in this field, but he himself was an excellent example of leadership. And when he was asked what is a good leader, he would take, he had in his wallet a crumpled piece of paper that reported that Lao Tse had, saying, when a good leader see that his task is accomplished and things have been achieved, completed, all the people would say, we basically did that by ourselves. An effective leader is not into big egos, in other words. Carl Rogers said also, in my early professional years, he started as a psychodynamic, professional, and then went on to create his approach that called person-centered approach, exactly for this reason. When in my early professional years, I was asking the question, like, how can I treat or cure or change a person? Now I would ask, how can I provide a relationship that this person can use for his own growth? Gary, I cannot see any more my slide here on my computer. Sorry, I cannot. I can go by memory. I know what I did. Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah. Because that really slows down the transmission yesterday when we were all on the same one. So, the dormitory one.
So, if Carl Rogers before would say, how I do things to people, that's the meaning. Now, how can I relate to this person in a way that fosters growth and development of potentialities? He was also saying this, when I look at the world, I'm pessimistic, but when I look at people, I am optimistic. In my opinion, Alexander the other day was saying something like that, that we see, we read the newspaper, watch the news and television, say, oh my God. Then we have person-to-person meetings and hope grows again in our hearts. And can we educate people and also leaders to become more effective, more empathic, more able to listen? The answer is yes, by natural observation and research. Myself, in my institute for the last 40 years, we've been a massive interest in research amounting to 50,000 people on our courses that were created by Thomas Gordon, Leader Effectiveness Training, Teacher Effectiveness Training, Parents Effectiveness Training, Youth Effectiveness Training. I think that too much emphasis only on the leader would make us lose the prospect that the reality is created in society, by all the parts of society, by the polis. Abraham Maslow, that we later did a lot of interest research on people that were especially well-functioning, said that classic economic theory, based as its own inadequate theory of human motivation, could be revolutionized by accepting the reality of higher human needs, including the impulse for self-actualization and the love for highest value. He contended the vision of human nature that we just want, the basic things. Sometimes we're willing to die for values that we hold dear. Of all the tools available to us in dealing with conflict, none is more important than attentive, intentional listening. Listening helps reduce resistance and opens our thinking to creative solutions. Listening not only clarifies the message, but changes both the messenger and the listener. Listening makes it possible for both sides to have a change of heart. This is modern. And Carl reiterated that the man's inability to communicate is a result of his failure to listen effectively. Nelson Mandela, the famous South African leader, said, "It's better to lead from behind and to put others in front, especially when you celebrate the victory, when nice things occur. You take the front line when there is danger. The people will appreciate your leadership." Certainly they did in his case. Nelson Mandela also said, "Courageous people do not fear forgiving for the sake of peace." And dramatically he was able to embody that for real after the apartheid in his nation. He also said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And I'm not talking just formal, but to be educated, to listen, to see the others, the different people from ourselves with respect. When a person realizes that he has been deeply hurt, his eyes moisten. I think in some real sense he's weeping for joy. It is as though he were saying, "Thank God somebody heard me. Someone knows what it's like to be me." We have seen it in many cases. Unfortunately, too rare. This is an excerpt from a father-son relationship, and so many times are difficult, even when they are most good-willing father. And the boy says, "When I ask you to listen and you start giving advice, you have not done what I have asked. Listen to me. When I ask you to listen and you start telling me why I shouldn't feel the way I do, you are invalidating my feelings. When I ask you to listen and you start trying to solve my problems, I feel underestimated and disempowered. When I ask you to listen and you start telling me what I need to do, I feel offended, pressured, and controlled. When I ask you to listen, it does not mean I'm helpless. When I ask you to listen and you do things that I can and need to do for myself, you hurt my self-esteem. But when you accept me the way I feel, when I don't need to spend time and energy trying to defend myself or convince you, and I can focus on figuring out why I feel the way I feel and what I do about it. And when I do that, I don't need advice, just support, trust, and encouragement. Please remember that what you think are irrational feelings always make sense if you take the time to listen and to understand me." This was in a book of Mark Brady. And now let's see the down-to-earth, nitty-gritty people that are in business. This is Peter Nolte, the National Business Hall of Fame of Fortune magazine. Of all the skills of leadership, listening is the most valuable and one of the least understood. Most captains of industry listen only sometimes, and they remain ordinary leaders. But a few, the great ones, never stop listening. That's how they get word before anyone else of unseen problems and opportunities. So, even big business finds that it's intelligent to have not only ears, but a heart. Big egos have little ears, said Robert Schuller, and Woodrow Wilson, the president, said, the ear of the leader must ring with the voices of the people. Winston Churchill said that courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. So we already heard from our friends about participative leadership, transformational leadership. Here, Kravitz illustrates that a growing body of research show that companies with a participative management style are more financially successful than those with autocratic styles. More and better ideas, free flow of information, improved decision, higher productivity, higher morale, less absenteeism, lower turnover, all have a positive impact on the bottom line. A 10-year study of 30 companies published in 1996 demonstrated that organizations that consistently practice good people management create an environment that reduces, even eliminate significant workplace stressor and have higher sale, profit, growth, and margins. Here, yesterday, or it was the day before, Alexander said something interesting, as always he does. He said that let's not mistakenly consider all the managers leaders just because they have the power over the people around them. I agree with him, but I want to underline personally what I think and what we in the literature, when we say leaders, a leader can be a kid of 5 years old in his kindergarten. A leader can be a humble person that in the village is not the village doctor or the village, head of the village, but is somebody everybody go because is recognized as a natural leader. So much so that I work, I'm a collaborating center of the World Health Organization and Health Promotion. We go, when we wanted to help a community, especially in the third world, we go and find the natural leaders, what we would call here the opinion makers, and engage them. They are much more effective to bring change than the official authority, than the official manager. So a leader is somebody that inspires people. They have the trust of the people, and the people see them as such. Thomas Gordon, Carl Rogers' pupil and author, I think he had about 23 million all over the world in the country, at least they allow, I think 133 countries, we have this training program that in some places we give away for free. Parents effectiveness training, teachers effectiveness training, leader effectiveness training. The research shows that are effective, not with everybody, of course. And he said that leadership is a set of functions that are the property of the group and should be distributed to group members. This is a very interesting concept. It's not mine, but a group, as a group consciousness, has leadership and has to be distributed. We call that empowering. The most effective leader is one that creates the condition which he will give up the traditional leadership role and become more of a group member. Consequently, group members will then carry out some of the function of the leader. Group problems require participant group problem solving. Leaders create a condition in which all the group members feel safe to communicate their ideas and feelings. Group-centered leaders set a model for empathic listening. Group-centered leaders convey acceptance of the members' communication. We already reiterated in those previous sessions about the importance, not only for a leader, but for a healthy person to have not only good IQ, but emotional and social intelligence. For time constraint, I'm not going to reiterate what already was said. Anyhow, the emotional intelligence is to understand what is going on in the people I'm with, and social intelligence is to have environmental empathy, is to understand what is going on in the group and the community. From the many research, I extrapolate some of the aspects that are considered the common denominator of most effective leaders. They decrease the power differential between self and team members. So it's not somebody who's trying to get more and more powerful. It's somebody so powerful that gives power away. It's a person who said that is so rich, that is so generous, not stingy. They create conditions for distributing the leadership function through the group. They show respect for the intrinsic worth of team members. Show respect for team members as individuals who are different from the leader. So they don't look for yes men. They deeply feel that people aren't there to be used, directed, or influenced to accomplish only the leader aims. They listen with empathy, demonstrate acceptance, they express their own belief, needs, and ideas honestly, clearly, and without blame. They work to resolve conflicts in a win-win way that creates mutual need satisfaction. And I wonder if I could ask ourselves, anybody could, do I really trust the capacity of my team or individuals in my team to solve the problems that are facing us? Or do I basically trust only myself? Of course, the leader would have the responsibility to take decisions. I'm not saying that everybody. Do I create a climate in which my team can have a creative discussion by being willing to hear, understand, accept, and respect all the inputs? Or do I find myself trying to influence the outcome of the discussion? Do I honestly express my own beliefs and ideas without trying to control those of others? When there are problems and conflicts, do I make possible for them to be brought out in the open, or do I subtly communicate that they should be kept hidden, that disagreement is not possible? So, the skills that an effective leader would need to possess and develop to meet the group member needs are behavior that increase group members' self-esteem and personal worth, behavior that increase group cohesiveness and team spirit. The skills to meet the organizational needs are the behavior that motivate productivity and the achievement of group goals, behaviors that help members reach the goal, like planning, scheduling, coordinating, problem solving, and finding resources. And then skills to resolve conflict, because the effective leader must learn skills to resolve the inevitable conflict that arise among his team members. As we say, the problem is not conflict, but how conflict is seen and handled and managed. So, promoting the processes that protect and foster the development of fully functioning persons, families, groups, and organizations, and communities that foster the development of effective and compassionate people-centered leaders is not only of vital importance for human survival and the welfare of the planet, is really what it needs to do. Of course, and for time we started in late, so I'm going to cut short. The slides are going to be visible for everybody interested. I would say that also important is the vision of we have of human nature. Can we trust the human nature to be, taken in a positive direction? That's very important. That's also what, in other words, I was saying back then. I bring, and my life experience confirm that the vision of what is called humanistic psychology, that I was in agreement with Alexander, that we will need to really consider what kind of vision we have. He was for putting a humanistic education even for scientists, engineers, mathematicians. I totally agree. Humanistic psychology was grown, one of the leaders about Carl Rogers, Maslow, Bugental, because they felt that the previous vision of human beings were mechanicistic, reductionistic, and pessimistic, and humanistic psychology think that we can trust the nature of frogs, of grass, of apple tree, that have all the inherent capacity, thanks to the process of evolution, to have a capacity to adapt to the environment and survive and prosper. We should be trusting also human nature and remind ourselves that human beings, like Menninger said, are capable of making self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's try to be optimistic and try in our life to be part of the solution, not be part of the problem. Thank you. Now, actually, if I can borrow your program. So I see who's first of the panelists. Here we go. Nagan, Professor Nagan is the first of the panelists. Please.
Good. Yes, I'm in effective agreement with almost everything you said. So I've tried to add an addendum using Bodan's lead-in yesterday about some personal experiences with leadership. When I went to university in South Africa, the government had enacted legislation euphemistically called the Extension of University Education Act, but the act was basically designed to block the non-white population from going to the rank graduate education. I was lucky to get into the traditional black university, which had also been affected by the legislation. And this university was a special project for the government. The African National Congress had already been banned from the campus. The National Union of Students had been banned. And if you remember of any of these organizations, apart from the possibility of prosecution, you'd be banned from the campus. So the first sort of test of my sense of leadership was when the mathematics professor was arrested without any charges, and his family was immediately ejected with 5 children from his home. And students had a meeting, and since I was the law student, I was forced to be on the committee. I didn't particularly want to be visible. I just come into the university. And but when we met with the rector, everyone was scared. And after due silence, I began to pepper questions to the rector. And the more I peppered him in a cross-examination, the more squirmish he got. And eventually simply admitted, look, I take my orders from the head of the special branch, secret police. And there's nothing I can do about it. This is it. Apparently this had elevated me in the eyes of the leadership, although I'd say this was leadership by accident, And it was at the next meeting that the ANC, which was banned but had a presence, met with former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. And Mbeki came to the college with a very interesting idea, namely that we need now to convert resistance to apartheid so that we have an exclusive black organization, the ANC, purged of other racial groups, and it would be black versus white. And I was invited to this because of my earlier performance, and there was a silence in the room, and then I raised the question. I said, you know, is it appropriate to use the strategies of white supremacy to generate a kind of black supremacy? So is this really what we want? And to my astonishment, everyone else supported me. And I made a lifelong enemy with Mbeki because I found out 2 years ago that I was very high up on his blacklist of people to prevent from coming back to South Africa, so for what it's worth. But it was in that meeting that I met a gifted leader of the ANC, Chris Hani. And he was absolutely brilliant. He was a fantastic scholar. He had a great sense of humor. And more than anything, he exuded empathy. He could listen. If what you said to him was said, you could rely on it. And he was actually what I would call a natural leader. We all look up to him. And in fact, it was Chris Hani that brought me in. He thought I had some modest leadership ability, so on. And he became a lifelong friend of mine until he was murdered. My work continued with Hani's support, and because we had such intense secret police activity on the campus, there were always terrible incidents. Torture was rife, things like that. And I began to write under nom de plume about which special branch officer was torturing whom, in what location, etc., etc. And I didn't realize what the effect of these articles would be, but they came out in the newspaper, and so everybody knew that it was somebody, but I never ever disclosed that it was me, although it was my understanding that people were arrested and accused of writing those articles, although I was the person. One night at about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on my door. There was a guy. He had the hell beat out of him, and he was still bleeding and so on. And he came in and he said, "Winston, they asked me about you, but I want you to know I didn't tell them anything. They don't know shit." His words, not mine. And I was amazed at that element of solidarity and respect he had for me. Apparently thought all those articles I'd written were of some value to the community and so on. And so that, I continued that, but I did find failures in leadership. After I went into exile, the ANC wanted to meet with me to be debriefed, and one of their guys met with me. And he said, "We don't have any more contacts. Could you give us a few?" So I had quite a number of people they could have connected up with. But after I gave him about 15, he dived across the desk, dragged me out of the room, and said, "I'm sorry, the room's bugged. South African Special Branch has bugged." I couldn't believe that the guy would elicit all these names from me, knowing that the room was bugged. So there are some questions here. I couldn't trust that leadership afterwards. And apparently they didn't trust me, because when I was able to set up a scholarship scheme for South Africans who were thrown out of higher education, I managed to get about 40 plus in the first year and another 40 in the second year. They actually took that as some kind of a conspiracy against the ANC, as distinct from an effort to complement what we were doing. And so I would say that the issues of leadership are not simple, but they do require trust, they do require effort, they do require compassion, and in some ways Harney's own murder was a function of his openness and his compassionate nature. He was the one that Mandela picked to be his successor, and it is widely rumored that Mbeki had orchestrated the murder of Kusani. But he would have been a fantastic, incorruptible, open, generous, truthful, and a deep, deep, deep humanist. Finally, I did write a tragic piece about leadership, which you can pick up on the web. It's called The Fragility of the Heroic Ego. The Fragility of the Heroic Ego. And it's something that I experienced with regard to leadership, namely that frequently the leaders that are the most aggressively promoting themselves to the front of the pack and so on are often fragile psychologically. And the case I had in mind is a true case. He's dead, so I can mention his name, Adrian Leftwich. He had tremendous oratorical skills, aggressive, competitive, always wanting to be in the front of the pack. And he did recruit me into some organization, and I never trusted him. So I, luckily for me, declined. The special branch got to his apartment one day and found the names of all the people that he had recruited. I was saved because under my name, he wrote, "This guy has got no revolutionary potential. He's hopeless." So when the special branch read that, they kind of absolved me for a while from strict scrutiny. But it didn't take 48 hours for Leftwich to turn state's evidence and to testify against all the people that he recruited. And these people went to jail for long terms of imprisonment and so on. And Leftwich was given an exit permit to leave South Africa. He ended up at York University and never mentioned his background or what he had done. The judge in the case called him Genus Ratus, but he became quite famous there as one of the great saviors of South Africa. Until one day his president and I met, and he said, "You know, I know one of the real heroes." And I said, "Who?" He said, "Adrian Leftwich." And I winced, and then I told him the story. And Leftwich was forced to do some confession in England in some journal in which he wrote this rather pathetic article called "I Gave the Names." So leadership can be fragile. You can't, its exteriors may mask vast vulnerabilities from within. And I just use that as a caution. Thank you.
Thank you, Winston. And now 10 minutes to Bogdan, Harriet Smith.
Well, we often cite known personalities as examples of great leadership. It's natural enough because we can all identify with them because we know them. I would like to cite an unknown personality, a man actually from whom I learned the most about how to motivate people. And he was certainly people-centered leader. His name was Tony Savoie. He was French-Canadian. He worked, as I did, in the biggest aluminum factory in northern Quebec, French-speaking part of Canada. There are 200 people, managers, engineers, that spoke English. There are 7,800 workers, including foremen, who spoke French. If you're interested, you could read a little book of that time. It's called De Solitude, Two Solitudes. There are these two communities, actually, that had very little contact with each other. At any rate, I was responsible for maintenance of part of that huge plant. And I had a few foremen. Each one of them had, say, 20 technicians of all kinds. Now, they had introduced so-called plant maintenance. There was a group of technicians in the office who would get the report from the operating people, which machine broke, what needed to be repaired, etc., and would make up worksheets, the program for each day for each one of these technicians. And it would say, well, you have to do this, do it thusly, and you have 2.5 hours to do it. Tony Savoy asked me, can I do it my way as I did it before this plant system was introduced? I said, yes, what is it? No, he could not articulate it because he only had a few words in English, and my French was pretty well non-existent at that time. So he said, I'll show you. So he goes to one of his workers and says, Charles, your machine needs to be repaired. I stress, your machine. That implied that that man had worked on that machine before, etc. But that always struck me. And he says, Charles, how are you going to repair it? I said, well, I'll do this, and then I do this, I do that. And Tony would ask him, well, how much time do you think it'll take you? I said, well, it'll take me an hour and 45 minutes. He said, it's fine, you go ahead, and I'll come and visit you maybe in an hour's time, and if you need some help, I'll give you a hand. Well, the result of that was really quite fantastic, because what he did, actually, he gave the proprietary feeling about one's work. He didn't give him part of the property, if you like. There's no shares of the company. He gave him the property, if you like, over his own work. Now, so in his group, when that man actually would find an easy way of doing things and do it in an hour and 15 minutes rather than an hour and 45 minutes, he would run back to Tony Savoy and say, Tony, we thought it would take us an hour and 45 minutes, and I did it in an hour and a half. And then actually he would go on to another work. Now, in other groups, you see, men would also find out that there's an easy way, shorter way, better way. But they wouldn't run to their foreman to say that I did it so and so. They would go to a shop. It was a very dirty shop because it was crushing of coal to make anodes. So we lived actually with that coal dust floating all over, penetrating everywhere. At any rate, they would go there and smoke and actually talk about these stupid technicians that thought it would take so much. Well, the concrete result was that we did proper study after. The efficiency of the work of that particular group was 40% higher than all the other groups. And there are about 40 such groups in the factory. So I was utterly impressed because it's a very simple notion, but it was very people-centered, if you like. So, no, you are sort of the master. You tell me how you're going to do it. It's your thing. I was so impressed that when the man was going on retirement, 30 years later, I was director of management school in Geneva then. I wrote to the president of that company, which employed 60,000 people around the world. I said, the best manager that I know of in that company, in your company, was Tony Savoy. If he only had a little bit more of educational degree, he would have been immensely better than the general director of that factory that employed 8,000 people, etc. So since you talked at the micro level, I thought, yes, you see, leaders actually exist there as well. And they don't have to be taught how they have to be the leaders. But about some other, let's say, things, to try to answer the questions that are after your talk, is that by giving people the proprietary feeling about their work. I stated that. Now, how do they deal with the... Yeah, you borrowed my notes, so I have to go back to them to see what the questions are. Yes. So the second question was, how do effective leaders build trust, confidence, and commitment among those they lead? I think they have to work with them with sincerity and speak the truth. Thirdly, C, how do effective leaders relate to their followers and subordinates? They relate with them as if they were their equals and not their superiors. D, how do effective leaders develop effective second-level leadership? Well, by liking people. And the final point, E, what type of practices can be applied to promote effective leadership? Well, emulate the role models. If you like people, and always speak the truth. If you don't like people, or don't always speak the truth, don't try. Now, I can add a couple more things. We are 5 good friends at the same university, studying in different faculties, and one of them almost never spoke. We talk about listening. And I asked him one day, Vasha, why don't you speak up sometime? He said, Bogdan, if I speak, I can only hear what I already know. But if I listen, chances are I'm going to learn something new. And with that, as Alberto, in a very subtle way, tells me, stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Bogdan. Actually, you stopped even before your time was finished. But thank you. You can, be so eloquent. And now let's pass the mic, so to speak, to Philip Kelling of Praneo.
Thank you very
10
much.
minutes.
Alberto, you have brought up 3 topics that are really post-conventional for the leadership, and I think we should emphasize those. One is the quality of relationship, the listening, the quality of listening, and forgiving. I'm wondering how many management schools are actually bringing up these topics the way you have. So I would like to take relationship. What can we do? What are the tools that our audience could be using to improve the relationship of the places where they are, whether it's university, whether it is apprenticeship somewhere, or in their professional lives? My experience in Latin America has shaped a different way of relating into a company. And I could paraphrase it this way: we wanted our friends to work with us, and we wanted our co-workers to be our friends. And I'm wondering if this can be a clue to how we can relate differently. Do we bring the management of our home, of our friendships, into the companies, or do we bring what we learn about management in a company or an organization to our friends? And I think those are very, very interesting questions, in the sense that what is in our mind important when we relate to people? Is it friendship? Is it trust? Is it authenticity? Is it the way we relate to our kids, to our wife, to our friends? Or is it shaped by the way we act within an organization? And I would challenge us to take the best of both and bring bring it and cross-fertilize it on both sides. Listening, another maybe post-conventional way to talk about listening. Maybe the very first listening is listening to our inner voice. Because once we understand what we have deep inside of us, once we get out of all those mental intelligence voices, mind voices, what do we listen to? What is inside of us? And once we can relate to that inner voice, then it's much easier to listen to others and provide a safe space for other inner voices to actually start to come up. Safe space, is that not the biggest challenge of leaders? To provide a space where people can actually say what they believe, what they think, without the artifice of a function, a role. Really bring out their deepest beliefs, their ideals, their dreams. And if we bring that together, we can probably create more emergence. We can make each one flourish. Each one can flourish to his full potential. Each one can actually be fully who he is. I would like to propose a book from Mark Strong called Lead with Wisdom, How Wisdom Transforms Good Leaders into Great Leaders. And I'll just read briefly the description of the book. A practical guide for leading others with wisdom, integrity, and humanity. Our leadership should be based on our shared humanity and the stories that unite us. It is all about learning to read key patterns of human experience, the way language shapes our reality, how we form new meaning through conversation, how relationships determine influence, and how we deal with uncertainty. So he proposes in his book 4 arts of leading wisely. It's about drawing out and creating a new story of any organization. It's about finding and leveraging the brilliance of people. It's about speaking with promise to restore meaning and hope. And it is about grace in dealing with the most demanding people and circumstances. I would like to propose, and that will be my final comment, 2 actions, very simple and very concrete, that anyone can apply any day in any circumstances. The first one is towards the people you lead. If you bring them together into a room and ask them what are they most proud of, by working on the pride of people, you get their brilliance out. If you let them tell you and your team what they're most proud of in their lives, you will see how the dynamic of the group will change once everybody has shared what they're most proud of. And the second one is being the first to show vulnerability. Bring together your team, and you as a leader, bring up a story like those we have heard this morning of vulnerability. And once the leader has started, you will see that all the team members will want to share also their vulnerability stories, and then the dynamics of the group will radically change. And maybe a last one, smile. We've heard it before. We had the experience of a Swiss hospital, large hospital, 10,000 people. 500 people are missing every day because of being sick, because of being depressed, because of burnout, because of nonsense in their day-to-day work. And the hospital, the leadership decided, let's do one campaign, one thing. And it is bringing smiles to the people, engaging people with smiles. When they come into the hospital every day, the first thing they should do when they meet a face, when they meet somebody, when they meet a heart, smile at him, acknowledge the presence, and that will change the way we interact with each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. And now let's have some of the present colleagues have their say. Alexander.
Thank you, Alberto. And thank you very much, all of you, for extremely discussion and the ideas. I wanted just to jump on a couple of issues because I think that some clarification required about what I've said about the filters of leadership. Why I said that leadership is not any person that can lead the others or can organize the others for some action, for some activity. For me, maybe it's not. I do not insist on my view, but for me, leadership is something which opens the way to the future. It's not just any kind of organization of people for any activity. And for me, of course, a 5-year child cannot be called a leader. He can be called a child with leadership qualities that could develop or they will not be developed in the future. We don't know. I've checked, and it's not incidentally that heads of states are not called leaders of states. They're called heads of state because they have something. They organize something. It's not necessarily leadership. And I look for different synonyms. Head, forerunner, chieftain, boss, director, and lots of synonyms to that word. Huh? Well, Führer is leader. It was called as the top of the tops, and he was called Führer, the leader. Therefore, I don't think that we can, if we're talking about the leadership, that really, I don't remember if I got here or in Afghanistan, but I said that our, let me say, concern, my concern, that we're talking all the time how to find the exit way from the current paradigm, and we should look for the entry way into a new paradigm. So, in fact, leadership is finding the way into the future and pulling the triggers of change. That is the real leadership. Then I wanted also to say a couple of words about the current leaders that we have been discussing quite a lot. I think that there are no chronic idiots at the top level of the state governments. That's clear. And it would be ridiculous and funny even to imagine that these people are not clever. They are clever, but they're clever in a different ways. Because I think that they could be somehow, let me say, disoriented with abstract categories like good and evil, like the category that if you do something evil, you will have to pay for it sooner or later. But they're very, high-level scholars, professors, and academics in everything which is pragmatic. And pragmatism, in fact, is exactly first of all, the way how, to escape not paying your bill. In many senses. So, we are talking about the fact that current system filters the leadership of pragmatic people to go at the key position. And therefore, we should not be complaining. The system depends on us, on our choices, on what we are doing. And it simply functions according to the rules that were determined for this system. Then I want to say about happiness. I've heard a lot of talk about happiness, and I wouldn't be surprised that at some point even the Universal Declaration of Human Rights will be enriched with the right to happiness. I think this is a stupid notion, because no one can be happy all the time. Happiness is a special state of your soul, of your mind, and it can be reached 2-3 times in your lifetime. I remember my father told me that one of the rare seconds of happiness was when he was going from the hospital after being wounded during the war back to his unit, and he was, by the way, somewhere in the Balkans. It was late February, and he said, I've never been that happy before or after that. I was young, I was about 30 years old. I was just going on the road with my bag, coming back to my friends, and there was sunshine, and there were pine trees, and they smelled of raisin, and I was alive. Can we now be happy that we are alive? No. And happiness, generally not possible as a permanent state. You've given quite interesting quotes. I will give you just another in support of my view. And it is Chekhov, who is Anton Chekhov, who is one of the, I think, best writers, whose main vision and whose main concern is this atomization or disconnectedness of human beings as a source of the drama of thinking person. And we say, how many happy, satisfied people there are after all, I said to myself. What an overwhelming force. But apparently, those who are happy can only enjoy themselves because the unhappy bear their burdens in silence. But for this silence, happiness would be impossible. It is a kind of universal hypnosis. There ought to be a man with a hammer behind the door of every happy man to remind him by his constant knocks that there are unhappy people, and that happy as he himself may be, life will sooner or later show him its claws. Catastrophe will overtake him, sickness, poverty, loss, and nobody will see, just as he now neither sees nor hears the misfortunes of others. But there is no man with a hammer. The happy man goes on living, and the petty vicissitudes of life touch him lightly, like the wind in an aspen tree, and all is well.
Thank you. Yes, and then Ivo.
I would slightly disagree with what you said about a child cannot be leader. I recall, and most of you will recall also the address of Severin Suzuki, a child of 9 or 8 or 10 years old, young, at the Earth Summit in Rio, 92. She spoke 6 minutes, 42 minutes, and 42 seconds. And he had all the audience bewildered, baffled, and overwhelmed, because she was able to raise very plain, very crystal clear questions to the audience and to the world politicians. How is it possible that everything is on the table and nothing is being done about it? And she was the perfect manifestation, incorporation of a leader at 9 years old.
Just one, I know this quite well, because we served both in the Great Charter of Down syndrome. Now her position, she is a mother of 2 wonderful children, and she says, my primary is not family. I want to make my children happy. That's what I want to say.
Bob? No, Ivo, sorry. And then Bob. Ivo.
Just as a comment to what Alexander said, and it's not by saying that I fully agree, that the measurement index of happiness is an ill-defined concept. However, there is an enormous amount of work on that. King of Bhutan has actually suggested that, of course, that is the only proper measure. But then there is another study which correlates GDP, Human Development Index, and so on, with happiness. And as a result of this, you see a typical curve that as GDP is low and then increases, then happiness increases, but once you reach something reasonable, I guess, I don't recall exactly, but something of the order of $10,000 per capita, then everybody else is essentially equally happy. Now this kind of phenomenon, by the way, let me also say, is completely follows the consumption of energy compared to GDP. The ecological index compared to GDP and so on. So it means that after some time we are really making things bad without any necessity of improving the things. But since I'm talking now, let me just go back to the thing that we discussed yesterday. But in order to take part in that discussion, I had to do a homework, which in the meantime I did. In the session chaired by you, Bogdan, you of course rose to the question of values. And with the values, and then Gary spoke and so on, there is an extensive world value study, which is one of the most extensive studies which goes, as a matter of fact, linearly, means starts in 1980 and then every 5 years and so on. And they have produced what is called the Inglehart-Wenzel chart, which I will distribute over so that you see how it looks. And this does not make me very happy how it looks, because they put this in a two-dimensional space where the coordinates are, one goes from traditional value to secular values, okay? The other goes to the survival values, to the self-expression. And then they enjoy very much of, for instance, grouping these countries. So you have one group which is called Catholic Europe. You have another group which is called English speaking. The third one which is called low income and so on. And then they, as I said, this is, so we just pass it around, maybe each second person. And so it's really, the other thing that they do is they see how much is this changing through the time. Now, this lumping into traditional, secular, and so on, is also forgetting a number of very important values. For me, and for us, obviously, the value number one is the human being, and the humanity. And this is nowhere here, because apparently everybody is taking into this. I'm saying, I'm giving this study, why? Because once we use any concept, and for instance, we have also used the concept of energy, we have to be careful that these concepts do have their well-defined meanings. So when we use them, we have to know whether we are negating that meaning or we are within that meaning, and what that meaning means. Because this is an extremely large group of people, as a matter of fact, is huge, involving religious organizations and so on. And of course, we will have again tomorrow a chance of addressing this under this last session on spiritual leadership, life, knowledge, and wisdom. And just like happiness, all of these are ill-defined, as opposed to GDP, which is a very lousy indicator, practically good for nothing, and is a well-defined indicator, and you can produce it every time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we not running out of time? What time should we end?
10:30.
Oh, 10:30. Okay. And we are searching, not always putting it that way, What are the common characteristics of leaders?
Gentlemen, Bogdan is speaking.
Evil. Bogdan is speaking.
Multitasking.
Well, I just remembered that there's a very nice research done. It was in California, back some 40 years ago. They collected people that were thought to be exceptionally creative from different professions, different fields, architects, artists, etc. And they kept them in California, in a nice place, for a month, trying to find out what these people had in common. Now, the finding was, at the end, that all of them that indulged in alcohol, drugs, or sex, or the combination of the three in different combinations. And that was about the only thing that these highly creative people seem to have in common. Now, when teaching a course of productivity, on creativity, and particularly group creativity, I would say, well, if you want to be creative, start indulging in some combination of these three pursuits. So I just wanted to mention that maybe, and actually this course and conference actually differed because we are really not trying to find common characteristics to all leaders. And I was happy, therefore, that so many different kind of leaders are cited, without us trying to conclude from that all of these leaders had some common characteristics. Almost by definition, a leader is the person that is somewhat unique. Anyway.
I'm sorry, but they make me notice that I was mistaken assuming it's 10:30 the end of this session, and we already jump ahead 5 minutes. 1 minute because you were a long time, and I'm sorry, nobody else has time. There are 5 people, but we are robbing the time of the next section. Sorry.
Comment on the title of our session, people-oriented leadership. It's awesome topic. At the same time, I think we need to think about the boundaries a leader has to have in his life, and especially maybe emotional boundaries, because listening skills you were talking about are very important, very powerful. They even can save lives. We use them in suicide prevention as our first and number one skill, really to help people to deal with their struggles. But at the same time, I notice and I found that there are very many leaders who have very good intentions, but with the cruelty they are facing around, they are struggling. So they are struggling also because maybe I think we need to find this balance and to help them understand what is the being, what does it mean to be people-oriented, and what does it mean to take care of yourself? What would be the boundaries in interaction with the teams, in interaction on the governance level, or when you are an agent of change? Because unfortunately, we have situations where even people in high quality or in high leadership positions, they think or commit suicide. So we need to somehow to put these together. Otherwise, we tend to kind of throw people into the fire with talking only about this.
Thank you. Unfortunately, there is no more time. We're already robbing the time of this new session. Maybe you can add in the new session what you want to say now. I renounce to conclude, but only with the Bogdan statement. To be an effective leader, you have to like people. Thank you, and sorry for this.